Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes to give some people the chance to log in, and then we'll get started. Okay, so I hope we didn't lose anybody to daylight savings. I had this webinar as starting an hour earlier, so if you got that email saying that the webinar starts at 2 p.m. instead of 3 p.m., sorry if that threw you off, but even if not, we'll make sure to send the recording to everybody who signed up. So just a bit of housekeeping. As I said, this webinar is being recorded, so if you want to review this or share with your colleagues, or if you have to jump out early, that's fine. You'll all get the recording of the webinar right after we're done here, as well as any other additional resources that we might mention or talk about during the webinar. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We plan on going on for about 40 or 45 minutes today. I know that's what I typically say, and we typically go over, but we'll try to keep it within our time limit this time. First of all, I just want to introduce Igor, who's joining me today. Igor is our VP of Engineering. Igor, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Always welcome, Ron. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so just in case this is your first time around with Scalr, my name is Ron. I'm on the marketing team here. We're going to be talking about VMware today, and specifically how to take the VMware provisioning workflow and make it easier with self-service and policy, make it easier both for the end user and the administrators themselves. Before we do that, Igor, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Igor Savchenko. I'm VP of Engineering on Scalr. I'm working on Scalr since the beginning for the last 10 years. And here at Scalr, we're trying to make it easier and more secure to use cloud and offer self-service to one of the biggest organizations in the nation and in the world. So, yeah, challenging use cases, trying to make them easier.
Yeah, so before we dive in to talk about VMware, I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that everybody is familiar with Scalr itself. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what it is that we do at Scalr, and I think it will give you a better understanding of how it relates to the rest of the things that we're going to be talking about on this webinar. So as Igor just said, we've been working for the past 10 years to essentially build a platform that helps some of the world's largest enterprises to move into the cloud. And we like to talk about it as kind of like a cloud 1.0 and cloud 2.0. It's kind of how our founder, Sebastian, likes to talk about it, where the first iteration of cloud management was really about just bringing applications to the cloud. And the second iteration of cloud management is about bringing the entire organization to the cloud. And that has to do with making the teams themselves more productive, but also just aligning the needs of every enterprise groups. The end users, as we'll go through today, some of them might be power users, some of them might be users with repetitive workflows. So for example, QA engineers, sales reps, or any type of user that needs something that's a bit more repetitive. All of these types of users need to be made productive, and IT is constantly under immense pressure to deliver that agile platform that enables and empowers that productivity from the developer and end user point of view. But on the other hand, they can't compromise on security or cost or remaining within budget or remaining within the compliance standards, all of those different checklists and standards that we're going to talk about. And that plays a heavy role in the VMware workflow today, because the traditional ITSM workflow would have an end user submit a ticket, and then maybe that ticket goes through the cloud admin or the VMware admin that has to manually provision something. We'll kind of talk about this a little bit more. But the reason that workflow is in place is because at a large enterprise, you have to check all of those boxes that have to do with compliance, with security, with cost, with all of that. So we found that most of the challenges that come from cloud management and operating in a hybrid cloud strategy where you have to consider your public clouds as well as your data centers fall into these four major challenge areas. And these are also the four value drivers that we like to talk about when you talk about Scalr. So the first one will be platform flexibility, reducing vendor locking and increasing the portability, not just of applications and workloads, but also the portability of your actual administrators and developers and end users. So as we'll see today, a lot of the things that we'll be building and creating and provisioning on VMware, you'll be able to do the same way and port that over to AWS, for example. So you're making those skills portable as well through repeatable workflows. The second one is security and compliance. So encouraging best practices and controlling access and privileges at scale. This is an interesting one. Recently, we did a big survey around IT leaders in large enterprises. We found that not only that security is a top concern in multi-cloud environments, but that specifically user security and permissions, role-based access control, all of that was ranked as the top concern. Not that it's more important than compliance and workload security, but maybe it's a harder problem to solve. So you want to bake all of that into the actual provisioning workflow. Third one will be cost optimization and visibility, the ability to track, control, and assign and reduce costs easily and at scale. It's a challenge that typically starts with visibility, being able to track exactly what's going on in your cloud deployment. We actually have a lot of great content coming up on this specific topic pretty soon, so I won't dig too deep into this right now. And lastly, maybe the most important that kind of ties everything together is user productivity, because we want to, at the end of the day, make sure that the users get what they need as fast as they need. So the Scalr mission statement is to give application teams and end users the autonomy and flexibility they need without giving up on security, cost, and compliance. And that is what one of our customers called the Federation of IT Teams. IT teams gain the autonomy and the operational flexibility they need while we're maintaining corporate compliance and cloud best practices. So what you're seeing here is basically the typical structure where you have your central IT unit that services either different business units or departments or whatever the line of business or construct that makes sense for the customer, for that company. And within each one of those, you have multiple teams that operate. And this is also the structure that Scalr operates with. So central IT can enforce compliance policies. They can create basically those policies at their level that need to be applied to the entire organization, but they can also delegate autonomy onto their business units and their teams in order to make those productive. So we're going to go into how Scalr works and exactly how cloud management works as it relates to VMware today. Just wanted to go over that quickly just to put things in perspective as we typically talk about these hybrid cloud environments that also include AWS and Google Cloud and Azure and OpenStack. But today we're here to really focus on the VMware workflow. So now that I've gone on for just a bit, I just want to encourage everybody to submit your questions on the GoToWebinar questions panel. We won't really pause for questions, but I do want to get all of those questions in before we get to the demo, and that is where we're going to spend most of our time today during the actual demo and seeing how everything works in action. So try to get those questions in. If there's something that we won't have enough time to get to during the webinar, we'll follow up with you and we'll share the answers with everybody. Okay, so Igor, I want to talk a little bit about the VMware workflow today, and what do you see are some of the main challenges that that you are trying to solve with the things that we're talking about? So, can you tell us a little bit about how the VMware workflow works today, and what do you see as the issues with it, and from feedback from our customers?
Absolutely. So we added support on VMware like a couple years back, and initially started from Amazon, all the cloud native. But working with these large enterprises, we learned that like one of the reasons why users actually started to provision stuff on Amazon, even if they have everything in house, like I'm talking about compute, is the current processes on how to actually get a VM. So in the 21st century, in most of the enterprises, you submit an ITSM ticket where you describe like what you need. It can be some portal or some ticketing system, doesn't really matter. But the thing is, you submit a request. We've seen examples when you actually need to do this in paper, which is crazy, I think. But you submit a request like what you need, what compute resources you need. This request go to IT department, where they have like a checklist of things that they need to do. So first of all, based on request and based on the purpose of this request, like how you want to use this compute machine, they will spin up, they will open like vCenter, spin up a new VM by specifying like data center, computer resource, on which data storage should be stored on like cheap HDDs because it's like just dev test machine, or super expensive like SDDs for some production database. Then they will, as soon as like VM is ready, they will pass it to security team to make sure that machine is secured in terms of like all the latest patches, all the software is there, everything is configured. And after a couple of these iterations, you will get an actual machine. So this process, like I think everyone hates it, because users hate it because it's like they want a VM to play around with their like with their application, do some experiments. They need compute power, and it requires submit a ticket, and then they waiting for this machine to come up. And some organizations can take like weeks, even months to get the one or multiple VMs. And IT department hates it as well, because I mean, it's manual work, and instead of like spend their time on this awesome, cool like DevOps automation and like some cool features and stuff, they need to actually do this manual repetitive work, which is just provision stuff through vCenter. And we've seen some organizations trying to create some like internal tools for the IT admins to make it quicker to provision in vCenter, quicker provision like most common requests. But usually these tools are limited, and they still like don't provide all the flexibility and security compliance and policies around how things are done. So you still need to verify everything, double check everything before passing this VM to the end user. So this is why like we've seen a lot of examples when rogue IT appears in the organizations, when like people like the users and like the developer teams, they just really sick of waiting like days or weeks for the compute power. So they're trying to get access, like depends on the company policy, they'll just create account on Amazon and just quickly launch machines there. And there is a second component, and there's a second component here with VMware, like in the 21st century, trying to automate your application deployment, which we call like infrastructure as the code or DevOps practices. And with VMware right now, and the way how VMware is available for the end users, it's pretty much impossible. So they cannot script and automate VM provisioning, deprovisioning, and build this into application at application level. So this is the current workflow and problems that we see in big organizations.
Yeah, so, and it also, a lot of people are expecting this concept of self-service, but especially large enterprises or conglomerates or any company that's in a regulated space, the repetitive and the manual process, you often need that in order to ensure compliance or to check all of the compliance checkboxes that IT might be required. So that is kind of that challenge that they have, where on one end they need to deliver a faster way for developers or for end users to get what they need, but they also, I mean, that repetitive ITSM workflow has been there for so many years because it works, because it really does ensure compliance. But now they're sort of at a place where it's starting to create issues. And as you said, trying to automate it on the VMware side is often challenging because there's so many different things that you have to solve for. The provisioning, the decommission of servers, what do you do when you want to scale or you want to make a certain tweaks to it? So the whole thing becomes incredibly challenging and can distract from more meaningful work. So yeah, this is a lot of what we've been seeing out there. So what I want to spend some time talking about is how can we kind of make that workflow better? What are we trying to do here on this specific webinar, but also generally what we're trying to do with Scalr, and how we see a lot of enterprises starting to go through that process. So it starts with, instead of going through the manual provisioning workflow, we're basically building a workflow where administrators can package all the required automation and policies into what we call a service catalog offering. And then users are able to consume those service catalog offerings at self-service, and you can apply your release management and your quotas and all of those different things to those workflows. Do I have it right so far, Igor?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So the end result of this is that end users get their resources faster. Administrators can rest assured that all of these workloads are compliant with security and cost and automation standards. So essentially what you're doing is that you're codifying or basically baking all of those manual checklists that you would have to go through. You're basically baking that into a self-service workflow that is dependent on the identity of the user. And the reason I mentioned that is because we're not going to have time today to go through one of the full Scalr demos, but the previous webinar that we did was all about role-based access control and just the access policies in general and placement policies. So all of the things that we covered in that webinar, which you can find on demand on our website on scalr.com/resources, can be applied here. So the service catalogs and basically the provisioning methods that we're going to be building today, you can govern those with your access policies and with your placement policies in order to tie them into your user identity and permissions. So that is an important piece to remember, because it's not enough to make it easy for a user to come into a service catalog, click on something and provision it, but you also need to make sure that that user is, for example, compartmentalized from other application teams, or maybe they can only edit the service catalog offerings that are owned by their team. And what's the difference between that user and a more advanced user, and how can they operate in the same environment? These are all things that we need to think about as we're provisioning this. So we're going to jump right into the demo here, and Igor is going to walk us through basically how we're going to build out everything that we mentioned up until now. I just want to quickly kind of outline what we're going to see in the demo, and of course we can kind of see some more things as we're going through it. And then I just want to also mention how Scalr is architected. So it'll be a bit easier for people who are seeing the product for the first time. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is just the simple provisioning experience as an end user. What does it look like from their perspective? They come in, they provision something. We're going to take a look at a couple of options, one where we only have limited choice and one where we have more choice, and we can also use an automated option in order to let Scalr choose the best settings, like for example, the data stores that we want to provision into and how we avoid provisioning into data stores that are full. We'll take a look at that. Then we'll take a peek behind the scenes and see how we enforce VMware policies and other policies that make that happen. Basically, how did we build that service catalog offering? And then finally, we'll take a look at how we actually build and publish an application blueprint. This is something that is not specific to VMware, so we'll see if we have enough time to go through that in depth. So just real quick before we dive into the demo and I give control over to Igor, I just want to make sure that you're familiar with the Scalr organizational model, which is really the core of how Scalr operates and how we'll be able to reduce a lot of that administrative overhead. So we're going to be operating mainly in these two scopes. And you can think about the Scalr organizational model as the hierarchy by which Scalr works and how it maps to your organizational structure. So it's very much like a federal government where you would have your administration at the top, and then you would have your state and your city, and each level of management can set their own rules and policies, but also has to comply with the rules and policies that were set by the management levels above. So for example, if Igor will set some sort of policy under one of these accounts, and these are essentially tenants, these are completely compartmentalized cloud deployments, you'll see it coded by the color green there. So if he'll set some sort of policy here at this level, it will then be applied to all of the operating environments that belong to that account. So you'll see that we'll kind of switch between the blue scope and the green scope, where the account scope represents the line of business or the department, and the environment that can be dev or production or staging or whatever that may be. So with that, I'm gonna give Igor the presenter role. So let's pray to the demo gods that this works okay. So Igor, I'm gonna make you presenter. Just let me know that you got control.
Yep. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Amazing. So yeah, all these pictures and text in the presentation is awesome, obviously. Great job, Ron. But now we'll try to show like cool stuff because people like to see things in action.
Are you mocking my marketing skills?
No. All good.
Yep.
So let's start with a magic trick. I logged in as like end user. So let's pretend that I'm just like a small but very talented developer in a very large like Fortune 500 companies. Like I'm one of the 10,000 there, and I'm working like for the last couple of years on my application on my laptop provided by the company. And now I finally need some like access to like corporate cloud to make sure, try to integrate it with some other services in my organization, or just like maybe demo it to the internally, I don't know. And what we learn from all this like Fortune 500, like the most common request you can imagine coming from the end users to the IT teams is just bare minimal like Red Hat or CentOS box or Windows machine. Like it's not a cluster, not a stack, just basic box where I can try to install stuff, play around safely, and then just terminate it. So here we'll show like how user experience will look like for the soul servers on VMware. So let's just imagine that I need CentOS 7 box. I log into my Scalr environment, and now I want to request CentOS box. I'm really like CentOS is super cool, so let's try to request it. This will be my test, my experiments box. And now it's very important to, like, this box will consume some resources, which means it will cost some money. And there are 2 projects that allocated to me. And this one, let's pretend that I'm working on a new website and I want just to test things. So we'll select project Scalr new website. Hold on a second. I forgot. Sorry, demo gods was not super happy. Yeah, again, my experiment box, Scalr new website, continue. So this is like the deployment configuration. And like, if you're familiar with how things works at vCenter side, on vCenter you need to specify data center, compute resource, find the template. Here, end user, everything that I need to pick is like size of the VM, and this orange badge indicates that account owner limited the choice. So here, corporate IT said that I can, like, for self-service, I can launch on the small and medium boxes. We'll go with a small one. And network, the only network is available for me is local LAN. So apparently I won't have access to the internet, which is important from security perspective for dev test, for self-service. Click continue, like this is what I'm going to request. And I'll click create only, just a matter of time. And this is my application. So I'll switch to the one that I requested previously. Basically, as soon as it's launched, it will launch the VM, and basically after like a couple minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, wherever it takes on VMware to launch the machine, I'll have my box running with projects associated with IP address where I can log in and use this box. So I don't even touched anything on the VMware side. IT admins did zero manual work to provision this box. It's secured in a way how we will talk about this in a moment. And it's 100% self-service, and as you can see, extremely fast. And here I can see I can do my basic actions. So let's just, I don't need it anymore, so I'll just terminate it. And this will automatically terminate the machine, deprovisioning it, and release resources to whoever needs them. Ron, was it like simple enough?
Yeah, so it's important to also mention that right now we're working in one of our operating environments. This is called the VMware Dev Test environment. We set this up just for this demo, but it's also important to state that you can see that the user that Igor is logged in as only has access to the service catalog and to the applications that they provisioned, and only to this environment. Another user might log into the very same environment. If they have more permission, they might see a larger service catalog, and they might have access to the actual underlying, what we call the Scalr farms, essentially the application blueprints, and will be able to go in there and do additional work. Yeah, great stuff so far.
Yep, so now let's see like what it takes from IT to actually offer this self-service. And the whole process consists of like 2 phases. One phase is prepare environment, and it's basically set up all the policies and quotas and cloud credentials, how cloud should be exposed to a user. And the second phase is actually create these offerings, which is basically package the infrastructure configuration plus application configuration in one template, where some stuff is predefined or some config options are exposed to the end user for him to configure. So let me quickly switch to like an admin, IT admin mode. and we'll walk through the process. So please confirm that you can see my screen. Ron?
I can see it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can see it. Sorry, I was talking to myself on mute.
Yeah, happened. So this is my VMware DevTest account, and I'm IT admin who configures it. So first of all, it links to specific cloud credentials, which is pretty much access to specific vCenter. Now, with this environment, we associated 7 policies, and let's take a quick look into them. So one of them is cloud instance name template. So for me as IT admin, I want to make sure that all my VMs are named in the same way across all my vCenter. So I don't want users like name VM differently, so then I can figure out like what this VM about. It's important for multiple perspectives, like name and policies are important. So you can see the same names in your monitoring system, in your alerting system. And just for people like me, I just like everything to be perfect. It's important to see things the same way. So here I configured that all machines that launch in this environment, VMware demo environment, will have a name dev-demo-machine index. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all VMs in vCenters will look like this. And another policy is instance types that allowed to be used in this environment. Here I selected 2 of them, but for example, in some cases, I want to allow only small instances types to control my capacity. But in this particular examples, I gave user a choice from smalls and mediums. The third policy is location. So in vCenter, you can have like really dozens of different data centers. But they're like, some of them will be for production, some of them will be for dev tests, some of them like has more expensive hardware that should be used for specific use cases. And in this particular case, for the users for the self-service offering, I want to allow them to launch resources only in, so in our VMware deployment, we have 3 data centers, but I want to provide self-service only in DC1. So I'm limited like users to what like vCenter data centers they can use. Another one is networks. So for dev tests, it's very important to stay secure. I don't use us to provision machines into the network which has internet access. Everything should be local. So I allowed only local LAN for this environment. The next one is compute resources. Is every region has, every data center has different compute clusters. So here, I just don't care which one should be used. So I allowed cluster 1 and cluster 2. The last one, the almost last one, is folders. So I want in this self-service environment, all machines to be provisioned in specific folder. In this case, I select VM, but I can give users access to multiple folders, but here I want to be very strict, and all resources in this self-service environment should be provisioned into VM folder. And the last one is data stores. So here in data center 1, I don't really care in which data store people will deploy their machines, so I allow them 2 of them. So this is how we set, so vCenter is big, multiple data centers, compute resources, multiple networks, port groups, data stores that exist there for different purposes. But for the self-service, we want to limit users into where and how resources should be deployed. Does it make sense so far, Ron?
Yeah, so essentially now you're going through the process of automating that checklist that we talked about earlier, because we talked about how a request for a server or a stack of servers might come in, and then the administrator will not only have to build it themselves, but they'll have to make sure that all of these different checks are in place, like it's in the right data store, it's in the right folder, it uses the right compute resources, the right networks locations, and all of that. So this is a way for you to set up that checklist in advance. The VMware admins, they might still do some work in vSphere. That's perfectly acceptable. But when it comes to delivering self-service and when it comes to making the end users more productive, the end users will go through Scalr, they will do their provisioning, and as we saw, this process will not take any work from the administrator as users get what they need. And the administrator will also have an audit log of who did what. And if they need to come in there and change something in the policy, or maybe add a reclamation policy that shuts down these workloads after a certain amount of time, all of that they can do through here. And you can see that now Igor is in that account scope, signified by that green bar at the top. And that means that he can create these policies here and then assign them to different environments as he sees fit, as he sees relevant. So, and these multiple environments can even manage the same vSphere, the same vCenter, or whatever's relevant to the customer use case. Yeah, great stuff so far.
You'll be a great IT admin. So.
Well, I mean, I used to do a lot of this. I used to build VMware test labs, so I did feel these pains. I wasn't always just a marketing sellout.
That's great. So let's go back to this environment that we prepared. So we established the policies, like how this vCenter can be utilized in a self-service mode. But now there is a bigger problem on VMware, is capacity. So like if you will give users unlimited resources, there's nothing truly unlimited in VMware. There are always like limited space in your data center, in a cluster. So you want to make sure that users won't go on like a server launch spree and like consume all capacity, and then you'll run out of resources. So another thing that we did for this self-service environment is we associated resource quota. And in this particular case, we allowed only 50 servers to be launched. So combining this with the policy that only small and medium instances can be launched, we know like how much it's CPU or RAM. We can very easy like estimate and figure out that like this is capacity that we want to provide, and then it's up to users how to use this capacity. Another example of the policy and resource quota combo would be, it's not actually, we won't limit total servers, but we will limit number of vCPUs and memory. So we will allow users like any instance type, so they can launch like one CPU, like 2 gigs of RAM, or like 100 CPUs and like 256 gigs of RAM instance, but it will be under the subject of quota, so they can launch 100 small machines or like one big machines, up to user. But in this environment, we limited the instance type, so it's only small servers, and we allow only launch 50 of them. And the very last piece is actually ACLs, and I will briefly show like that here for this dev test environment. There are two teams can access to, is basic user and power user, and this can be defined in my corporate like Active Directory or my IDP through SAML. Doesn't really matter, but basically I'm limiting the users who can access to this environment. So this is where we prepared the environment where resource will be launched. Now let's try to switch to a service catalog management. And here I'm as IT admin, I already pre-created the service catalog offering, and let's quickly move through what it is. its name, its category, some description, it's published, it's used by already a couple applications. I can put some offering details so user can see like what's inside. So if, for example, if it's not like just CentOS box, but something bigger, like some applications deployed inside, I can describe it there. Application details used to provide details about deployed application. Here you can expose some access details, IP addresses, some additional information about like when app is deployed. And the last part is Scalr farm template. Basically, the offering always represented by infrastructure as the code concept. It's a JSON file that defines this offering, like what infrastructure should be behind this, like how many machines, what images I should use, storage, some additional settings, as well as some orchestration and application deployment. In this case, it's simple template, which shows like which represents only one machine, but we'll show like an example how the large one look like. Ron, does it make sense so far? Any questions?
So essentially, what you're doing here is these are those service catalog offerings that that we saw earlier, and this is how you build them out and package them onto the service catalog. So since we're looking at it from the perspective of the administrator, from that green account scope, this means that the service catalog offerings that are being built here and being versioned here can then be distributed to multiple different environments. They can also be created down at the environment scope where we started and then promoted to other environments. And then since there's the infrastructure as code capability in the farm template, that means that you're able to then version that or launch it through the API or essentially do other things with it. But that is not something that is specific to VMware. You're able to do that across the other cloud platforms as well. And yeah, if you want to learn more about that, then we'll follow up with some resources as well. Yep.
This is actually a cool thing you just mentioned. So the farm template, you can skip all cloud-related stuff like specific data. So you can specify the specific data center and data store for very like specific offering. For example, offering of Oracle database, it should be deployed only in specific compute cluster, only in specific data store that was designed and used only by Oracle. So you can like put here like cloud-specific stuff. But also you can have this generic offering, which will behave differently based on the policies that we applied. So in like this offering available in like multiple environments, and an environment where we showed previously, you limit it only in specific data centers, specific computer sources, specific data stores. But if you will try to deploy it in another environment, then you'll be able to deploy it in another data center, in another vCenter. So in completely different cloud environment with the same like easy and self-service way.
Yep, definitely. So to kind of wrap this up and to kind of tie a bow on it, can you take us back into the environment and show us what the application blueprint actually looks like and how you're able to export that into one of these JSON files into these service catalog offerings and publish it back into the service catalog?
Absolutely. So this is my like Power Console, and here it's called VMware Design. I have a full access to this environment. So I see this my experiments here, and let's take a look on this LAMP farm. Here it's like, as you can see, it's like much more different settings. Here it consists of 3 tiers: application tier, MySQL database, and Nginx load balancer. So here I can configure stuff like orchestration, some VMware specific things like customization specification. I can configure additional storage if I want for this tier. So I want like to make sure that application servers will come up with additional disk for 400 gigabytes. So this is what we call Farm Designer. This is where I design like application stack or specific application, different configurations, bootstraps, networking, like everything. And at the end, I can still launch it, test it. And when I think everything is ready, the only thing that I need to do is click Create Offering. Here I created offering. By default, it's not published. It's available only in my environment. Here I can see this pretty complicated JSON file, and I can adjust what's visible to the end users, what should be pre-selected, what should be like available for him to pick. As soon as it's ready to be promoted to the broader audience, I click Promote Offering to Account Scope. And let me quickly switch to the source catalog more. I did this earlier, and here's my LAMP stack template. It's much bigger than the previous ones. It was designed the way how I shown to you. And let's actually try to deploy it just to show how easy to deploy, not only like the single server, but application stack. So give me a second, I will log in back to the regular user.
Yeah, so in the meantime, I do see a good number of questions coming in that I didn't get, that I didn't have enough time to get to. So just to quickly mention that any question that we didn't have time to answer during the webinar, that's what I was trying to do when I was kind of interrupting here and there. I'll follow up with everybody and answer those questions over email, and we'll share the answers with everybody.
So I quickly wanted to show you a couple things. We really ran out of time, so I'll do this quickly. So when we tried to deploy CentOS 7, there were like really minimal amount of things that user can change. But let's, for the Windows offering, Windows and project, new website. In a template, I still forgot to configure something. Very sorry about this. Share my screen again. Windows test project. So in my Windows offering, I actually didn't specify a lot of things, so I want to expose to users more choices. And here I can select instance type. I can select a placement strategy. Manual is where I can specify the specific clusters, and it's still, as you can see, this badge means that it's limited by the policy. So here I'll select cluster 1, data store is also limited, and my local LAN still limited. I can select another cluster, but I can also select the cool thing, which is Scalr Auto. And in this case, Scalr will automatically place this machine to the least, based on like your Scalr settings, by default to the least busy and resource. So like data store with most free space, and computer source with most free RAM and free CPU. But it still will be under policy, so Scalr will pick only from allowed list of computer sources. And the last thing that I want to show is actually how to deploy like a bit more complex applications, which is LAMP stack. So LAMP stack name will be test LAMP, and this is where I can configure my specific tiers. And again, like what I can pick here, what I can configure here is controlled by the policies as well as templates. So here, instance type will be small for application tier, medium for my database, and Nginx load balancer also small. let's try to review it. So this is my stack. It consists of application, small instance type, MySQL database, and Nginx load balancer. And just again, you can make it super simple. You can give user more choice. It's fully flexible. Let's launch it. And this is my LAMP stack, which is stopped right now. I can launch it, and it will launch all 3 VMs and give me everything that I need. Ron,
okay, awesome.
microphone is on your side.
Yeah, so let me just kind of quickly recap what we've been talking about. I'm gonna switch over a presenter back to me. So we went through, I think, pretty much everything we wanted to cover during the demo. We saw how you logged in as a simple user. You did some provisioning for the CentOS machine and the Windows machine. We saw those 2 types of approaches, one where we limited everything, and the second one where we saw at the end there that we chose what we want to expose to the user. This is something that you could do for different types of users, of course, as well as that Scalr auto option, which we were able to automatically deliver this application or deliver the workload into the data stores and the compute resources that have the most capacity, which might work for some deployments, might not work for others, but that's why you have those policies in place. We saw that in every case where we set those policies, that's where you see that little police badge that says that there's a policy in place, either that tells you you can only use this location or data store, or compute resources, or network, or that you have some sort of choice there. So we went through how those policies actually work and how you package that service catalog offering. So you might have seen that we logged in out of that blue scope where we were only able to see the service catalog at first, but then we were able to see the actual Power Console and all of the behind the scenes stuff that is usually reserved to more advanced users, but can still be governed by policies. And then we wrapped it all up by taking that application blueprint, that farm, and exporting that as a service catalog item. So it means that even if we do have that more advanced multi-server or container or with automation, or if it's on AWS or Azure, maybe it has cloud services on it, no matter what it is, you can package it into a service catalog offering and basically ship it to the service catalog. So we're going to wrap this up now. If I know that there were a few questions that I didn't get to, sorry about that, but we'll follow up over email and we'll share the answers with everybody. If you have any questions that were not addressed or anything else that you want to know about cloud management, VMware, the cloud platforms, the Scalr cloud management platform, feel free to reach out to me, ron@scalr.com, and I'll get those answers for you. And stay tuned for our next webinar. You'll get the info on that over email as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Igor, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me.
Always welcome, and thanks everyone for attending.
All right, we'll see you on the next one.